This is the Rings of Power podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about the Rings of Power, Episode 6, Udûn.
Remember when I was little? When I used to have bad dreams?
I remember.
You remember what you used to say? When you would hold me in the dark? Would you say it to me now?
In the end, this shadow is but a small and passing thing. There is light and high beauty, forever beyond its reach. Find the light, and the shadow will not find you.
Welcome back, fellow Ringers. This is TV Podcast Industries and the Rings of Power podcast, and we're looking at episode 6 of the Rings of Power, Udûn. I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm your other host, Derek. Nothing to talk about this week at all in this episode.
Wow. I actually just, second time through, I kind of stopped taking notes because I was just like, yeah, this was just pure greatness.
Amazing.
Loved it. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing, the kind of stuff they've got here. Like we mentioned before, how beautiful it looks on TV, but we haven't seen this kind of level of battles, apart from the prologue in the first episode. But wow, just the stuff they've put on here, absolutely excellent to watch. I can't believe this is something that we're watching every week on TV. It's incredible.
I know. It's just really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, you're kind of thinking of the levels that they went to when they did the Lord of the Rings originally, with thousands of extras, thousands of horses and that kind of stuff. And in here, they've got that going on in the background, with the amount of, the level of it is just incredible. Absolutely
Definitely. Completely hats off to them, on this. This was epic in all sense of the word. Really was.
Absolutely.
But we're glad to be back with our fellow Ringers.
We are.
With TV Podcast Industries. If you haven't yet subscribed, please head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can go to any good or evil podcast player of your choice, and subscribe to TV Podcast Industries there.
Absolutely. And if you want to send any thoughts to us, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with any thoughts about any of the shows that we're covering. We're covering She-Hulk, Rings of Power, Sandman, and we will soon be covering Pennyworth from DC, coming up on HBO Max from next week. So please send in your thoughts for any of those shows, or pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, and we'll have a spoiler post up for every show that we're covering as well. Hey, John, it was International Podcast Day yesterday, Friday, the 30th of September.
Yes.
So thank you so much to all of our wonderful listeners who've been joining us over the last 8 years podcasting. Always a time to celebrate our wonderful, wonderful listeners who join us and keep us going when we're podcasting, especially in a week where we've done a podcast, I think, every single day over the last 7 days.
Yes, I think it's 7. 7 over the last week that we mentioned there on the She-Hulk podcast, when Chris was able to join us. He's not able to join us again for this, but he is busy bee at the moment.
Yes.
So
yes, we're hoping he'll be back for the finale of Sandman.
Yes, most definitely. But let us get on with our spoiler-filled discussion about episode 6, Udûn. Derek, what are some of the episode details?
Well, this show is based on The Lord of the Rings and the Appendices by J.R.R. Tolkien. The showrunners and executive producers for the show are J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. This episode was written by them along with Justin Doble, who wrote the last episode, and Nicholas Adams. Nicholas Adams, this is his first major writing credit on the show, but obviously with the showrunners and Justin Doble, who's written episode 5, and I think he was co-wrote episode 3 as well. So obviously this is the writers' room all getting together for the biggest episode of the show so far.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it really felt like it was an end of the first season. So I'm glad there's another 2 to go, so we can see how that pyroclastic flow from Proto Mount Doom plays out.
Yes, definitely. If that had been the end of this season, can you imagine going fade to black, goes away for a year? No, definitely
But that would also have been great. You know, everyone salivating for a year to see what happens.
Oh, well, let's hope they have another cliffhanger built into the last episode. A change of director in this episode. We have Charlotte Brändström. She directed episode 5 and 6 of Witcher season 1, which we talked about on this show, and directs the next 2 episodes of the series. So we had J.R.R. Bayona for the first 2 episodes, Wen Chi-hip for the next 3 episodes, and now we have Charlotte Brändström on for the final batch of episodes, and what a way to kick it off.
Definitely. Really good stuff here.
Yeah, really impressive. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for The Rings of Power, episode 6, Udûn?
Sure. The battle for the Southlands begins. Adar and the Orc army advance on the watchtower of Ostirith and find it abandoned. While they search the tower, Arrondir destroys the tower, causing it to collapse onto the Orc army. The townspeople who move down the valley to their village cheer at the apparent victory, but must prepare for the next assault. As the villagers make ready to hold off the remaining orcs, Arrondir hides the broken blade hilt and professes his love to Bronwyn, promising a life together after the battle. The fighting between orcs, elves and humans begins, and while the villagers appear victorious, they discover that many of the enemy killed were actually their traitorous Southlanders. And the true orc army attacks from the shadows, killing many and severely wounding Bronwyn. Overwhelmed and cornered in the village tavern, Adar seeks out the hilt and begins putting the villagers to the sword one by one, until Theo reveals the location of the broken blade to Adar. With all hope lost, the surviving townsfolk are saved by the Númenórean army, who slay many of the remaining orcs. Adar attempts to escape, but is captured by Galadriel and Halbrand. They interrogate him, discovering his origins as a Moriondor or Uruk, elves corrupted by Morgoth. He taunts them, feigning memory of killing Halbrand's Southlandian family and claiming to have killed Sauron. Back at the village, Halbrand is hailed as the king of the Southlands, while Theo realizes the broken blade they recovered is a decoy, while the true blade has been carried back to the watchtower by Waldreg.
Waldreg.
Exactly. He uses it on the mechanism at Ostirith, causing the nearby dam to release water that rushes through the orc tunnels towards Mount Doom. Clashing with magma, the resulting eruption releases clouds of volcanic ash, hot gases and molten debris into the air, darkening the skies over the Southlands and spreading devastation.
Just amazing scenes here. Just unbelievable what they've done.
It really was. I mean, some really epic fighting, even though it's around a village, it's quite contained. Yeah. Again, some excellent vistas and epic shots, but also married in with some really intimate conversations. Such as between Bronwyn and Arrondir, the interrogation of Adar, and just that whole sort of intrigue around Halbrand and Adar as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. Some great moments in here, done fantastically. Will we go in and discuss our Tales of Middle-earth, John?
Yes, let us get to tale number 1. Arrondir sets up the orcs at Ostirith. I think, you know how Legolas and Gimli kept score? I do honestly feel that Arrondir has just surpassed all of that with effectively bringing down the watchtower and killing many, many orcs here.
Yes, it was really,
with its collapse.
Yeah, it was really, really cool, wasn't it? What a way to open the episode. We kind of start off with Adar and the orcs waiting to attack. You kind of think that this is exactly where we left them last week. They'd just arrived, but we have that moment where Adar is planting the seeds to begin the battle.
Yes, the Alfrin seeds, which is really interesting because we see Arrondir doing the same at the village before the battle with the orcs there, where he explains it's a tradition before battle done by elves. So certainly confirming elven ancestry for sure to Adar.
Exactly.
Here.
Exactly.
Although he chucks quite a lot in, whereas I think Arrondir just gives Bronwyn 1 or something. So I guess, a little bit different in how they use them.
Yes, luckily, because he kind of needed quite a lot of them later on.
Exactly.
So luckily he saved those ones. But on to Ostirith, when the orcs are coming in to capture the place, they find it empty, and it seems at that moment where they've all been readying themselves for the battle, shouting out Nompath, which is death in the black speech. They're shouting out Nompath, getting all riled up for this battle, and then walk in and realize nobody's there. So there's a little bit of not relief on Adar's face, but there's kind of a moment where he's going, oh, well, that was a lot easier than I thought.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we get that great moment, which feels like something out of an action movie straight away, when you have Arrondir standing up with his bow and taking out one of the orcs on top of the bridge, and he falls through the wood. It's just to kick off this battle. But really well planned. It's like something, again, out of an action movie where everything's been set up to go off in this particular flow that Arrondir set himself up for. He fires the fire arrow into a rope that's holding up the tower, which starts the whole chain reaction effectively. And then that jump over the bridge, kicking out the plank that pulls the door closed behind them, trapping them inside. It was really cool. It was interesting because when you see it first, when Adar's walking up to the door, there's a little crack in the door, and you're kind of going, well, this place, Ostirith, isn't really very safe, is it? And then you realize the reason why the crack is there is because the chain's obviously coming through it.
Absolutely. I was thinking, this doesn't feel like a tight fit for a door to a watchtower, for sure.
Need to get that workman back, yes.
I think the other thing from this as well, just going back to that rallying of the orcs by Adar, was really interesting, and it plays out later on in the episode as well, when he's being interrogated by Galadriel and Halbrand. But, he rallies them by saying, we are going to war, not all of you will come back, but that if you've fallen, it's as brothers and sisters in our homes, not as slaves in a distant land. It's really, kind of interesting, and I guess we'll come back to it later, but you can see why these orcs are calling him father. It almost feels protective. I think what's really interesting is it's painting these orcs as a community, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, which is really interesting, because I guess in a film, a lot of them are just, they're the lieutenant, they're the captain that just fight. It's really interesting how this show just is adding these little bits of depth to the orcs as an enemy. It's really, really found that quite an interesting speech, how he frames it to them. Rather than just simply a blood call or something like that. Absolutely. And I think that, as I say, it connects in with what he describes to Halbrand and Galadriel, about his, in a sense, relationship with Sauron and all that. Yeah.
And it also explains much more why they use the Southlanders that try to join up with them as cannon fodder, because they're not part of the Brotherhood. This is a true bond between Adar and his orcs, as opposed to what we saw before with Sauron and his orcs, where they were the cannon fodder for Sauron, whereas here these Southlanders that tried to join up with them are being used as the first wave of a battle, effectively.
It's like they're given much more agency, the orcs here, rather than being almost battle automatons.
Exactly. One thing I want to call out in Ostirith, because I'm so glad they didn't do what I thought they were going to do, because we have a moment with Waldreg, the Southlander traitor, who talks to Adar and says to him, "So tell me, boss, where is Sauron?" And then Adar gets interrupted before he says anything, and I was going, "Oh, please don't just leave it there. Stop asking the questions and not answering them." But luckily, later on in the episode, we do get the answers to that. But at that moment, I was going, "Don't leave it hanging. We need to know something about Sauron at this stage." So definitely, I'm really glad we got a story at least, and some idea of what's going on with the great big bad.
Exactly. I mean, the only thing here is you wonder how Adar and Waldreg survived the tower falling down.
Yeah.
But, there would be survivors, but I just, that was the only thing. I thought their numbers would be much smaller, given, as the camera pans back where you see the townsfolk who have escaped earlier and are cheering at this apparent victory.
Yeah.
You see the tower falling down the mountainside as well, and orcs all being crushed and knocked off the ledges on the passes up to there. So again, not only killing or taking out a lot of orcs, but also the injuries that would happen and that impacting. So that was the only little gripe for me, just on, from a real point of view. Yeah. But, I get we're in Middle Earth and this is fantasy. So
and you can't have your big bad die off screen.
No, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, but it did feel like there's a little magic at play to keep them safe from the rocks there.
Definitely.
But a cool start and a great moment for Arrondir. He has a few of them throughout this episode. I think most characters have great moments set up in their battles, but having Arrondir here effectively taking out an entire orc army, or at least slowing down an entire orc army. But he knows this isn't going to win the battle. This isn't going to be the end of it, which kind of moves us on straight away onto our tale number 2, the Battle of J.R.R, the village of the Southlanders. So this is the next plan. So he's set up kind of a wave version of their overall battle plan. Take as many out as possible as I can in Ostirith and allow the villagers to set up the next battle zone for what we're going to do next. Fantastic. Absolutely loved this as well.
This fight, this battle was really good. I mean, from two fronts, really, just the courage and use of the townsfolk. Like, they really did battle. It wasn't like they were just cannon fodder themselves.
Exactly.
Taking out a lot of the orcs. Yeah. And then with Arrondir's fight as well, just the precision of his arrow work, the plan. I really enjoyed his kind of rousing speech at the start as well. Yeah. It felt appropriate for effectively townsfolk and villagers who are battling to save their lives and their village, really.
Yeah.
I liked how he kind of, sort of repeated it at the end. It felt really good, and it made sense, and you could see why they would be fighting so passionately for this.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that bit as well. And yeah, I mean, the Arrondir stuff, really tense, in terms of the battle with the big orc that he kind of bumps into.
Yeah, there was some great stunt work here as well. There's a moment when he gets taken down off the roof, and it's a full roll across 3 roofs onto the ground with the 2 orcs and Arrondir, and it was great watching it because you can see their faces as they roll, so it felt like a stunt that Ismael Cruz Cordova did himself as Arrondir.
Yeah.
And then he meets the big orc, they battle, and then there's the grossest fight as he stabs this massive orc in the eye. The blood starts pumping out repeatedly. It's like as if it is pumping out through his body, straight out his eye hole, all across Arrondir, who does get saved by Bronwyn behind him in a classic
which is great
move.
As well, because, they have a little bit of a heart-to-heart before the battle. And
they do.
A bit of a kiss as well, which is great. And, I hope they move forward as a couple in this show, because I really like it. Sort of going back to the earlier episode where they say union of an elf and a human, there's only 2 or 3 that have happened before and they've not been successful. It's kind of it's a tough one to do, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm really rooting for them because of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It was great to finally see them kiss, because they have been this will they, won't they type couple for the last while. It was interesting as well because, of course, with half of the traitorous Southlanders leaving that group of villagers, the ones that are left seem to be much more open to following Arrondir. And why wouldn't you? He's a very powerful ally to have. But there's a lot less people pushing back against him giving them motivation and him giving them guidance effectively. So I kind of like that their relationship could survive with these Southlanders around, as opposed to the way it was before, where they didn't even want him in their village at all. So we do find out that half of this army that's come in are, as we mentioned earlier on, are the Southlanders that joined up with the orcs. They were used as cannon fodder to take out the major battle plan that the villagers had. so that the real orc army could come in. The kind of idea here from Arrondir is we don't have the power, we're not battle hardened, we are these mostly village people other than me, a soldier, so we will use our wits to outsmart the orcs who aren't that smart kind of thing. But it turns out actually they do have their own battle plan, which is very smart.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good touch, in this twist, effectively. Again, it's to the point of the agency of these orcs compared to, I guess, what we would have seen in the Lord of the Rings. But, you can see here that this, 8 episode, sort of over 8 hour can give this treatment to them. And it is a really nice twist that, the real attack begins, after effectively, sending, wave after wave of humans that in effect, in many respects, it seems as though Adar really isn't that bothered about.
Exactly.
And so I really like that twist here, and I loved how it ultimately played out. I thought there was really good horror vibes of everyone in the keep or the tavern being surrounded by the orcs, both in terms of, the terror of that, but also then when they break in and what Adar, very calmly just does, when he asks for the hilt and gets no response. He stabs one and then one of his orcs stabs another. And then, it's a real, pressure bit of, it's putting the foot on the throat and squeezing. Absolutely. And I really, really thought this was great. It felt claustrophobic. It felt hopeless. It felt terrifying. Yeah. And just with the lighting and everything, I thought this was really, really good. Even beforehand, just with Bronwyn having been shot by the arrow.
Oh, yeah.
How that was dealt with, I just thought was really good. The breaking off, her passing out after it being cauterized. Again, I think those alpharin seeds were used as a wound dressing.
Yeah.
Before
like a field dressing.
Yeah, before being cauterized. So I just thought this whole thing, it felt really close, intimate, pressured, tense. And with the arrival of Adar, it kind of just upped that with his order just being enacted slowly but surely, one by one.
Absolutely. I do want to give a big shout out, a big compliment for how realistic everything looks in this battle as well. Those arrows going through the bodies of the Southlanders who are standing on the roof to begin with, and then each one of the arrows that hits feels really realistic. They feel really weighty bits of metal going through the body. It's not like the wooden arrows that we see in most movies when bows and arrows are being used. These look really powerful, like they're really piercing through the skin. And as you say, that moment where you see Bronwyn having it taken out of her feels really realistic. It feels like it's really happening right in front of you. There's a huge amount of money poured in this, as we've said, loads of CGI work, I'm sure. But when they're able to do this kind of realistic battle, even though there are orcs with masks on, of course, but there's no magic in there, that it does feel really realistic.
Yeah.
So well done to the show for giving something that does feel really intimate, really tense.
Definitely.
And like a proper battle.
Yeah,
great
definitely.
stuff.
Yeah, really good. And also then, the Númenóreans to the rescue.
Yes, that was another thing I was going to say. I liked that we saw them on land. We saw them coming by sea to start with. So we get a moment with them as they're passing over, and we get the meeting of Galadriel and Isildur, which is a big moment really, in itself. But I like that we have them land, in the Southlands, but it's daytime and they're riding their horses. And then you get the cut to Adar and his threats to the Southlanders that are the villagers that are in the tavern, because while there are Númenóreans coming to help them, that they're not going to get there in time before there's going to be people put to the sword, before it's going to feel like there's no hope.
Yeah, that's it. It wasn't the Númenóreans arriving in the nick of time to save everyone. It was that a lot of the villagers had been killed. They were cornered and then slowly being dispatched in order to find this hilt.
And Adar gets what he wants.
Yeah.
Effectively, because Theo obviously doesn't want to see his mother killed. So, while Arrondir is trying to hold out and trying to dissuade them, Theo stands up and says he's going to hand over the hilt to Adar. So Adar does get what he wants there, you know?
Absolutely. And I love the little thing, sort of, you know, after he's gotten it, you just get this one-off line to Waldreg, I have a task for you.
Yes.
Which, again, links in to, you know, what we'll discuss in the next point.
Yeah,
but
I don't think there was any thought in my mind at all that blade stayed with Adar when he ran out of the village. I don't think there was any...
I agree. I had the same. I had the same thought.
You can see why they would think.
But in the back of my mind, there was just that little bit of hope that they would recover the hilt, and that's mainly because I actually wasn't expecting what happened at the end to happen in this episode.
Yeah.
So I thought it was going to be recovered, but there was that niggle at the front of my mind saying this. You know, he sent them on a wild goose chase, basically.
Exactly.
Waldreg, you go this way. I'm riding at speed, A, to escape, but B, to send them off the scent, you know?
And you can see why they wouldn't know, you know, again, it's all about the timing. There's no opportunity for Arrondir even to say what it is that Adar's got. You know, it just says chase him down. He's the leader. Chase him down and make sure that you recover what he's carrying. They don't give any reason behind it. He can't escape here without it. Last thing for me on the Battle of Tirarad is Galadriel's horse tricks as she arrives.
Good.
You know, again, loving that everybody gets their moment. These are all big characters in the story, so you want to make sure they all get their great moments. But as the arrow flying overhead and Galadriel going side saddle and literally cleaving one of the orcs in two as she rides is just a fantastic moment.
Yeah, it was really good. And I think as well with the Númenóreans arriving, I love the chain that they used between the two front horses to take down a lot of, you know, using the horses to trample the orcs. Yeah. But then seeing, you know, Isildur's mates, one much more confident with the sword, the other one, almost to Galadriel's point, you don't know how to fight orcs, seemingly not being able to fight an orc and having to be rescued as well. Absolutely. And I like when they talk of that mission that they're being sent on, and scout mission, that he wants to kind of stay back and help the villagers. You know, it's kind of like... Yeah. He's the Dr. McCoy, effectively, of the group. He's more that way inclined. So
he's had his moment where he's faced death and he doesn't want to do that again.
No, exactly.
Which makes sense. You know, again, we've talked about it in our last episode about what was going on in Númenor. They were a race of people that were protected from the outside. They did set up a sea guard to protect their seas from people coming in that could possibly attack. Yeah. And these guys had only just joined. So, you know, you would have that moment where you're in battle for the first time going, hang on a second, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe all those stories of joining the sea guard and all of the exploits that people say you should go on. Maybe I'm not the right person for this.
And it's, you know, their lovely white armor, very, very dirty here.
It certainly was.
I don't know how you would clean that up. You do think, yes, maybe just leave it as steel grey. And it almost reminds me of, you know, the talk of the thin red line with the sort of British army back, you know, in the day, that they would be going into battle with a bright red uniform on, as opposed to being camouflaged like you have now. And it feels like you can't really do much sneaking up on the enemy in a bright cream suit of armor, you know, with elaborate headdresses. But that's because, you know, you very much get from Númenor, a lot of the army is ceremonial. It's the point. It's to the point that Galadriel was saying, you know, you've never fought an orc. It's very different.
Yeah.
You know, they're relentless. You need to, you're not going to beat them with brute force.
Yeah.
It's with balance, like we see with Galadriel's tricks on the horse. So, like, I really kind of enjoyed that. It just felt really solid.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, as you say, if they'd known that the orc blood was black and oily, they probably wouldn't want to put on their white uniform. I did love how they showed the distinction between Elendil and the other members of the army, where he had that really elaborate headdress with the
quite high.
But also with the two side. What would you call them? Fins, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it reminded me of the soldiers who were guarding the Tree of Gondor. They have the same type of headdress, which we know hasn't been set up within Middle-earth yet. So just a little touch there that it's a similar type of headdress, this big ceremonial headdress. And also really cool that Isildur got to take part in the battle as well.
And save his father.
Exactly, and sent in there by Queen Regent Muriel as well. So she knows, let's not hold back Isildur. If he wants to go and join the battle, send him in there. So I really like that as well. So really good battle. Love that in Tir Harad. But let's talk about tale number 3, the capture of Adar the Uruk.
Yes. Or Orc. Who knows? But
they like to be called Uruk, John.
No,
respect their decision and their
but I
naming
really enjoyed that between Galadriel and Adar, where she is refusing to call him what he wants to be. And you know, it's all kind of, there's this just bitter taste in her mouth of what he is, who he is, and, you know, him being insistent, you know, squaring his shoulders at her saying, you know, I'm an Uruk, even right at the end as Halbrand prevents her from slitting his throat. With the knife at his throat, and she calls him an orc, he just quietly says to her, Uruk. I thought it was really, really good. It made for a fantastic kind of interrogation, superbly tense, you know, just, it almost felt like they were playing it as Galadriel having a mirror held up before her, with this dark side of the elves. I mean, absolutely. Even right after, you know, she's threatened Adar with the knife to the throat and, you know, her stinging words, he says, perhaps I'm not the only one filled with darkness. You know, how can you think that there isn't evil in elves? Exactly. or darkness, I think, more to the point. So, yeah. I just thought it was superb.
Absolutely.
Really
like, her threat to him is that she's going to keep him alive until she's killed every single orc and made him watch, and then tell him all his children are dead and then kill him. Like, that's a massive threat.
Like, of his children, she says, you know?
Exactly.
Exactly. Like, really kind of dark, intent there from Galadriel.
But what about the big reveal of the canon, effectively? This making this really clear now as to where orcs have come from.
The Sons of the Dark, or the Arrondir, I think is the first word that Galadriel says. She talks of it just having been tales.
When she was a child.
When she was a child.
So again, Adar being ancient, being even older than Galadriel,
exactly.
as well. It's a really interesting one because this has been speculated on quite a lot, and my understanding is that when Professor Tolkien wrote this piece about some elves being corrupted and they became the first orcs because Morgoth couldn't create anything at all. He had to corrupt and convert. He couldn't create anything from scratch. He wasn't a godlike in that way. So, this was his final word on it because there had been arguments about where the orcs came from. So his final word was that they started out as being corrupted elves. So confirming it here that this is how this world of Middle-earth is dealing with the orcs, and the absolute disdain from Galadriel to Adar.
Definitely.
This is where he came from. And
superb.
This is the choice he would make. It was fabulous.
It was really superb. Really tinged with bitterness and hatred. And as well, then, you know, you get that link, for me at least, to Adar's rallying cry right at the start of this episode and also to that question posed by Waldreg to Adar at the watchtower, you know, from Galadriel to Adar, where is Sauron?
Yes.
And we get this really, you know, interesting, how true it is, I don't know, but we hear Adar saying about how Sauron sought order in Middle-earth, you know, coming back to his words from one of the previous episodes about there being lies told as he's interrogating Arrondir, and that he, after Morgoth's death, he sought the power of the unseen, again linking to that fortress in the northern wastelands and the mountains. And, you know, Adar just says he was seeking this power of the unseen, power beyond the flesh. He tried, but he couldn't master. And this is where it links to the start of the episode, despite all his sacrifices of my children, as you see the flashbacks from Galadriel to that fortress.
Yes.
And then the revelation that I split Sauron in two. I killed Sauron because of what he had done to his children. And so, that opening speech, that rally cry, just gained weight and so on if this is how it's played out.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting one. We know Sauron's not dead, or at least he'll come back in the future, I guess. So it's a big revelation that we're not going to see Sauron in here as such, but there is a possibility. One of the other really interesting challenges in here, I suppose, is from Halbrand. A really interesting moment when Galadriel and Halbrand have finally captured Adar, and Halbrand's about to kill him.
Yes.
And challenges him, saying, do you know who I am, effectively? And Adar just says no. Which is an interesting moment, because from that point onwards, I don't think Halbrand wants to kill Adar.
Yeah.
He's the one that stops Galadriel from killing him.
Yeah.
And I wonder why that is, because Adar guesses, well, probably maybe I killed your wife, maybe I killed your child, maybe I tortured them, tortured your family, but that doesn't seem to get any moment of recognition from Halbrand. So,
yeah, it's a really interesting moment, as you say. It's, what is it that Halbrand is referring to? Because, for Adar, it's simply his family or the village that he lived in had been wiped out by him, something along those lines. But as you say, Halbrand is, do you recognize me? So we've mentioned how Sauron potentially is hiding in plain sight. Is it that Halbrand is Sauron walking Middle-earth, fair of face,
Yeah, as a man. Yeah, and it's interesting, as if you think about it in that way, if Halbrand is Sauron, well, he had a real reason to kill Adar. But when Adar says, I don't recognize you, maybe he's kind of going, ooh, actually, I can use this. Yeah. If the guy who challenged me most of all within the orc army, doesn't even recognize me, well, then maybe I can use this.
Yeah.
And interestingly, then we have him conferred as king of the Southlands.
Yeah.
He's called upon by Queen Regent to come out and take over effectively from Bronwyn, who's been injured and didn't want to be the leader that she was made be by the people, effectively. And very quickly, everybody kind of goes, oh, okay, are you the king? Then. No problem at all. Yeah. And all he has is his bag of bones. All he has is his bag that has the stamp on it.
And what is, now we're kind of, what is in that? I mean, the other thing as well, it also possibly lends a little bit of double meaning to what Adar said when he says, I split Sauron in two. Whether there's a kind of a yin and yang type element here to this. Whereby, and given he was seeking power from the unseen world as opposed to the world made flesh, and maybe it's that distinction that this is the split. So yes, Halbrand could be Sauron, but in a sense has been cleaved from something darker, like going into, this unseen power is ancient dark magic that is almost impenetrable, that Sauron couldn't master. So I just wonder if it gives a different meaning to what Adar said about being split in two.
Yeah, it certainly gives a different meaning to what he said to Galadriel last episode about, you don't know the things I've done, and if you did know, you'd cut me off. Oh, well, actually, I was Sauron, and I'm the one that killed millions of people in Middle-earth. And your brother. I think that would go down pretty badly with Galadriel.
Yeah.
They have a moment in this episode as well, when the two of them realize fighting side by side is a moment they want to stay in for the rest of their lives. That's the way Halbrand kind of says it. It's not the same kind of intent that we got from Arrondir and Bronwyn. Once the battle is over, we'll live in a garden together with Theo. We'll have our new lives together. This felt more powerful because they're both warriors, effectively. It felt like that moment when both of us were on the battlefield together felt like the perfect place to be together, is the way it seemed. So I don't know what exactly it meant. It could be a little bit of a relationship forming between the two of them, or it could be between two army colleagues saying, fighting alongside you is the best kind of fighting to do.
Yeah, but it was beautifully shot in that kind of woodland copse by the stream. I
sun
love
streaming through the trees.
Exactly, that wide shot with the sun coming through the canopy, really amazing. Just the sound of the stream, their whole conversation, and the deepness of that, and this kind of seemingly growing bond between them. But also, like, there's a moment where, you know, they're having this very intimate, close conversation, and it focuses on Galadriel in the foreground and puts Halbrand, you know, out of focus. I just thought it was really well shot, just beautifully done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really, really good moments. The final thing that kind of happens after that capture of Adar and his reveal of what's going on is we do find out that this blade that everybody was chasing Adar for doesn't exist. It's effectively an axe that's been wrapped up because the blade has been sent off. But there's just a quick conversation there with Theo and Arrondir, which I thought was really, really good, because you hear from Arrondir to Theo saying, "Don't worry about it. Most of us would have made the same decision to save our mother's lives. We would have given up the sword." And actually Theo's going, "Well, no, I feel there's a great loss now."
Yeah, it was really good. He says
it really kind of connects him to, like, the ring, effectively, that we saw in Lord of the Rings, this idea that when you're not connected to it, you feel like you've lost something massively powerful. He felt like he was powerful when he was holding it, which does kind of explain Waldreg.
Yes, exactly. Definitely. Like, Arrondir says, "Don't feel guilty," and he says, "It's not just guilt I feel, but loss," as you say. With it in my hands, I felt powerful. You know, like with the ring, this all power, the corruption of power. Again, one of these themes through Tolkien's writings. So really good. Yeah, really nice little moment there between these two. But I think with that, we should get on to tale number 4 as to where the actual hilt is, which is the creation of Udûn, or Mount Doom. Proto Mount Doom. I'd love to know what the mountain was called previously, just to have that. I don't know. Maybe it was mentioned, but effectively, here we see Waldreg doing his task set to him by Adar. Yeah,
I wonder if it was just called something like Mount Fuzzy Animals or something, and now it becomes Mount Doom. Now it's like Mount Beautiful place with lovely woodland creatures. I was wondering whether we'd ever seen a shot of that in the first 5 episodes, because we spent a bit of time in the Southlands. We spent some time in Tirharad, but I felt like most of the time we spent there was at night or indoors. But that moment, interestingly, when Isildur is talking about his first time in Middle Earth, and the first thing he says is, "Oh, I do like the mountains," because they don't have that particular vista in Númenor. I just thought it was interesting that later, the first shot we see of Mount Doom is this beautiful landscape with the snow on top, but it's about to become the central figure, I suppose, in the future of Middle Earth. It's about to become this massive moment.
It was just so well done, with all the ash, the projectiles, all of that. And seeing, you know, the reason for these channels, these tunnels.
Absolutely, that was massive,
from the orcs.
I love that it started out with Waldreg plugging the sword into his arm to create the full sword from the hilt, effectively, with his blood. So it's another blood sacrifice to Sauron, or to Morgoth, so that he can start this chain reaction. It was just amazingly put together, though, as seeing this whole mechanism start as the dams burst and the water flows down through the tunnels. Adar getting on the floor because he knows exactly what's about to happen. He hears the noises from outside, so he lies himself on the floor to hear his plan coming to fruition as he hears the water rush underneath him into the mountain. Amazing. Yeah,
and we also see that Adar has escaped his chains.
Yes, we do.
There is that shot of the barn as this pyroclastic flow comes racing down, breaking open the barn doors where he's being held. And we see that he's no longer lying on the floor, and just the chains around the post. So that's pretty cool in a sense, that he's managed to get out. Where he's gone and how, Who knows?
Same magic he used at the beginning to get out from one of those rocks, I guess.
Well, yeah, I guess.
He's got some kind of mystical doorway that allows him to get out of these places pretty easily, I guess. An interesting one, but it is amazing. And, you just realize, Halbrand is now the king of the Burning Lands, rather than the Southlands, I think.
Yeah. The other thing I really enjoyed was just the realization of the pressure wave as well, hitting through the village, ahead of this flow. It was really, really well realized.
Absolutely. An interesting kind of call forward, I guess, for when the ring is destroyed and that wave comes out and destroys all of Sauron's forces.
Yeah. That seemed a lot more powerful, but I guess given the power of the ring. But yeah,
this is just water and lava. Yeah.
This was the most epic geography in action ever.
I love it, John. I love it. You knew you'd like this this moment. Any other notes or comments about that scene or that moment or anything about the episode that we haven't talked about, John?
Well, this is the darkening of the sky to stop the sun from shining, and the formation of Mordor, this plan from Morgoth, through this seal that has been going around. So yeah, I just was not expecting it to happen here in this episode. Yeah. So yeah, it was fantastic, really unexpected, and just so good. Yeah,
really good. It does leave a couple of questions in this episode. I'm sure these are ones that we'll see next episode. We asked about how did Adar escape. We don't know. We may see how he got away next time. As we see Galadriel standing in front of this wave of molten lava and smoke coming towards her. Will she survive? Of course she will. We know Galadriel lives another couple of thousand years, so she will survive. But how? How is that possible?
The defiance of her as that ash cloud is rolling at speed towards her, and just the lightning in the ash cloud as well. Again, yeah. Really good touch there. So, really epic and fantastic sort of end to the episode.
I was thinking about the Icelandic ash cloud that we had when there was a volcano that went off a couple of years ago, which stopped planes flying for about 2 months afterwards. Can you imagine the amount of devastation this type of explosion from a volcano would do
exactly.
on our Earth? Another couple of quick questions that we had. There was a call out to Beric, the horse. Where's Beric gone? Because he was right there beside Isildur. And a call out for Theo. We don't see Theo after that moment that he says that he realizes that the hilt is no longer there. We don't see him again. So I wonder, did Theo take Beric maybe up to find Waldreg? Something like that. But the cat's out of the bag here. They can't just remove the sword and everything goes back to normal. We've had a massive event here, which can't just be reversed, which I think is a really interesting way to end the episode. I had just one note that we haven't talked about. It's just a conversation between Elendil and Isildur about Beric the horse. I know it sounds a bit of an odd thing to call out, but it's something that isn't mentioned. People who've watched the Lord of the Rings movies probably have seen the moments with Aragorn and Gandalf speaking to horses that they're with. We had the Rohirrim being heavily featured and heavily horse people, but it was toned down quite significantly in the movies versus what was in the original Lord of the Rings. In the original Lord of the Rings, the Rohirrim rode in complete union with their horses. They talked to them. They were living beings to them, not like their steeds riding into battle. So I thought there was an interesting conversation there between Elendil and Isildur about the idea that Beric the horse knows intimately who Isildur is, knows his doubts, knows his fears and frustrations, because they've now bonded as rider and horse, which I felt was a call to the Rohirrim.
Exactly, the Rohirrim, and also with Aragorn and his stead when it comes to rescue him in the Two Towers after he's gone over the edge into the river.
Yes.
So I thought that was really, I thought it was a really nice touch. Also, you see Galadriel as she's chasing down Adar as well, where she puts her palm on the neck of the horse in order to give it more speed and urgency. And we saw that with Arwen as she's riding away from the Nazgul with Frodo. So again, really nice sort of connections here to this world.
Absolutely, and the same exact words used in the book that Galadriel says here to the horse as well. It means faster. Effectively, it's just calling the horse to go at full pelt, but a calming kind of push to the horse to get it to run faster, run at full tilt, because this is so important. This chase down of Adar. Excellent stuff. I don't know whether we need to wrap it up with whether we enjoyed the episode or not, John, because I think it's pretty evident that this was an excellent episode, but built on the shoulders of 5 great episodes beforehand. I love how the series has treated the characters. I love how it's treated the build, so that
and the plot lines through it. I mean, again, we just thought the orcs were using the tunnels to hide from the daylight. Yeah. Not that it was a part of this more elaborate scheme.
Exactly.
They're really good. The threads running through kind of connecting up really nicely, even with the callback to, that fortress in the frozen northerly wastes. Just so good. So, I mean, at least from my side, this was 5 Mount Dooms out of 5. It was phenomenally good television. And I think all I can say is what I've just said in discussing it on the podcast. Everything, the action, the direction, the characters, the acting, just everything was done. It went from epic and sweeping to small and intimate, with hope, with tragedy, with effectively finishing with disaster as we get the start of the creation of Mordor through the use by Waldreg of the hilt, and just really tying into the lore and the world of Tolkien and Middle-earth. Just really good.
Absolutely.
So for me, 5 Mount Dooms out of 5.
Do you remember in those old days when we used to watch Game of Thrones, and it would get up to the big episodes towards the end of the season, and you'd be blown away by what they've put on screen in the TV show? Wow, has Lord of the Rings taken the cue from that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow. I was blown away by this. But again, I think the previous 5 episodes have been fantastic. I've loved the show because it's felt so part of Tolkien's world, and still being able to keep those intimate moments in here, along with so many big battles, the push back and forth between our major Southlanders and the Númenóreans versus the orcs and Adar. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Excellent stuff. Looking forward to the other 2 episodes.
Absolutely. Just, one quick note linking to your note on the horses and Elendil says the Horse of Westerness, which is another name for Númenor.
That's right. Yes. Good point.
To say, it feels like another part of Middle Earth, but it's the Star Island of Númenor, and the Prime Video notes that come up, take out the bit of the appendices that refers to effectively the multiple names. This is a living world for Tolkien, so the multiple names for the same place that are given to it,
Yeah, I've never seen a more Tolkien-like phrase than loads of things have many names. Basically, he's a linguist, so that's absolutely, if you have thousands and millions of people living in a world, they'll all call things differently. And once again, we have a little example of that here with the Westerness for Númenor. Good stuff. Shall we go on and hear some thoughts from our fellow ringers, John?
Yes, absolutely.
Good stuff. Let's start with some feedback on episode 5. Some feedback that came in after we got our podcast out on episode 5. First up, Coffee and Vodka sent in an email about that episode. He says, "Greetings, fellow migrating defenders. With the episodes dealing with more with hubris and fear than events, I'd been holding out till our protagonists meet up in Middle Earth. This, however, was the best episode of the series so far, with the last of the barriers being broken down, save for the Dwarf and High King. And anytime the Harfoots, Harfeet, are features, it's time to rejoin the conversation. The cinematography is like a moving painting framing characters, brightly heroic and darkly villainous, all well fleshed out with clear motivations. It's impossible not to become invested in the fates of the characters, even though we already know what becomes of the Southlands, Numenor, and the world at large.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I don't even mind that the stranger is most likely Gandalf. Hope there's a season 2, 5 slappable Isildurs, wounded wargs, and fighting fleets out of 5. Peace and take care, Coffee and Vodka.
Great stuff, Coffee and Vodka. Yeah, I'm totally, we do know what happens ultimately, but this journey that they're taking us on, is filled with so much tension. It's filled with so much hope, darkness, light, and, the characterization, as you say, the motivation. It's just really, really well thought out and put together. You know, the showrunners really do need a good old slap on the back.
Definitely. And I will say, good news, if you didn't know, we definitely have a season 2 of Rings of Power. Rumor is that we have, the show is planned for 5 seasons, but we definitely have a season 2 that's already in the works. So that's definitely coming. But as I understand, the show has been massively successful. They called out that there were 24 million streams in the first day of the show coming out. Recently, Nielsen have released their first ratings for the show through their analytics. In the US alone, something like 1.36 billion minutes have been viewed of the show. So minutes, not shows, because there's 1.6 billion people in the world.
Still a lot.
So it's quite a lot. Quite a lot.
A lot of minutes.
It is. So very successful for Prime Video, and that's an external source as well. So sometimes you can't trust those internal numbers that come out. So very successful, massive show, and yes, we will definitely see a season 2, which is always good to hear. But I know what you mean about knowing the face of some of the characters and some of the locations as well. But interestingly, some of the characters that we're starting to get really invested in, like the Harfeet, who we didn't know anything about before the series, and Arrondir and Bronwyn and Theo and what's happening with them. I'm really excited to see where their stories go, even though I have no idea. I don't know where they're going to end up in the story. So that's something that's working really well for this kind of prequel series, a couple of thousand years before what we've seen before. So glad you're on board with the rest of the season, Coffee and Vodka.
Good stuff. Thanks, Coffee and Vodka. Jamie Lawson on episode 5 as well had some theories after the episode. He says Adar is a proto-Saruman, as the stranger is a proto-Gandalf. In the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Saruman seems to hate trees and creates the Uruk-hai, while Gandalf likes hobbits and has been a presence in their society for a long time. Funnily enough, at first, I thought the two characters were played by the same actor, as they were very similar to each other. Also, I think Theo is the son of Halbrand. Thanks, Jamie. Yep, I know what you mean, actually, about Adar and the stranger looking similar. I had similar thoughts on that as well. Yeah, that they were potentially the same, but I think we know that Adar is played by the actor Joseph Morley, who was Uncle Benji in
Benjen Stark.
Yeah, Benjen Stark. The Ranger north of the Wall in Game of Thrones. And of course, Daniel Wayman plays the stranger. But I know I had the same thought for sure.
Wouldn't it be interesting in this prequel if it turns out the whole Harfeet story was, a couple of 100 years before the Adar story, and the stranger actually just turns out to be Adar? The only reason it can't be is because, remember, they all saw the meteor all across the planet. All of our major characters saw that. So that's the only reason they can't pull that trick of pulling the rug out from under us on that one. But yeah, really interesting. I like the idea that Adar is a proto-Saruman. Well, we learn a bit more about him in this episode, and we hear that he's the one that has been created as an Uruk by Morgoth. So he's not exactly the same as Saruman, but he has been turned from the light side like Saruman was, which is an interesting one. And your theory on Theo as son of Halbrand, I think weirdly we saw the promotional photos, which were thankfully sent out to us by Prime Video, where there's a promotional photo with all of the cast who are staying in the Southlands, all the major cast, those 5 main characters, which included Halbrand sitting beside Theo and Bronwyn. Bronwyn had mentioned that their father is gone, or his father is gone, in the first episode, and when we saw the promotional photograph, we were going, hang on, they just spoilt this, that Halbrand is the father of Theo, but zero recollection from Bronwyn when she saw Halbrand. So,
exactly.
So I think that theory that he's the son of Halbrand, I can see why the theory was there, but I think it's pretty unlikely because Bronwyn doesn't seem to have any idea idea who this person is, which would be unlikely for the father of your child.
Yeah. Definitely.
Unless, as we said, like Adar had no recollection of him, maybe he has got some power over himself that's blocking people from recognizing him.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. For episode 6, we got an email from Victor Von Doom. Salutations, my lords. This is the episode I've been waiting for. The final battle was great. I love to see Galadriel strut her stuff in combat. Well, it's about time Arrondir and Bronwyn got it on. I'm sorry it took an orc invasion to spark it. What a horrifying revelation. The villagers were fighting with their own people who sided with Adar. Halbrand's confirmation of King of the South obviously short-lived as Adar's fake-out bears fruit very quickly. Why did the men spare the captured orcs when only Adar was valuable? And Ithrassethel Victor Von Doom. Thanks, Victor. Yeah, it was interesting seeing the orc prisoners after the Númenóreans had weighed in and come to the rescue of the villagers. I thought that was kind of an interesting little touch. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I suppose the point is, orcs will slaughter everything in their path, whereas the world of men, the humans, won't kill everything because they're not murderers.
Yeah, but we know that they won't.
Capture them, so,
we know that they won't. And if it's for a reason, because Arrondir...
they've turned them into slaves, yes.
Yeah, and Arrondir was kept in order to be brought to Adar, probably because he was an elf. So I like the fact that it's not, as I say, it's not just bloodthirsty. When they're in battle, absolutely. Those villagers are toast. But I thought that's the interesting, slight, subtle shift that's happened with this.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe it was Galadriel wanted to keep the orcs so she could slaughter them in front of Adar to get what she wanted, because that was her threat, effectively. So, so maybe they were just keeping them as a threat to Adar. You never know. Yeah. It isn't there at the screen.
No, absolutely.
Thanks, Victor.
Thanks, Victor.
We also got an email in from Coffee Vodka about episode 6 as well. He says, "Greetings, fellow Mount-doomed defenders." Last episode, after 4 episodes positioning all the pieces, the Fellowship was finally afoot or a sea. At the end of this one, who knows? Epic, with excellent acting, awesome special effects, perfect pacing, and gritty battle from hero to twist, start to villain, twist, finish. Sometimes a production is so good, the only thing you can say is wow. Yeah. If ever there was an episode to submit for an Emmy, this is the one for this season. I'm going to watch this again and again. Wow. 10 toppling towers, meteoric mountain missiles, and terminated triumphs out of 5. Peace and take care, Coffee and Vodka. I know what you mean, but thankfully, we have more words than just wow to say about this, or else we'd have a very short podcast.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I totally, again, it was absolutely wow. As I said at the start, my notes became more sporadic as further down, or I just missed certain bits out because I was just wanting to watch the awesomeness that was being projected into my retinas effectively.
Yes.
And these first 6 episodes are so tight. There was an element of, well, what's happening here, what's happening there, and so on, but so much of it played out in this episode. It was really, really good.
Absolutely.
And just the style, the visuals, everything was just superb.
Yeah, incredible stuff. Thanks for that, Coffee and Vodka. Coffee and Vodka also asks, he knows we're swamped and enjoy all the discussions you're currently putting out, but any plans to take on the TV show Willow coming on Disney+. Trailer makes it look exceedingly positive, entertaining, and talk-aboutable. We're not going to be covering Willow. I'm sorry, we just can't fit it in, and we're covering Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, and then that's going to be followed with The Wheel of Time, so 2 major fantasy series this year, along with all the other shows that we're going to be covering as well. So unfortunately we can't fit in Willow, and I think that would kind of be a little bit over the top for us, doing that many fantasy shows within this year. I do like the movie. I did enjoy it when it came out. I know it was a notorious flop, but I do remember enjoying it when it came out many years ago.
I love Willow.
But we're not going to be covering the show on here. We will be watching it, of course, so feel free to share your thoughts if you're enjoying it as well, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Coffee and Vodka. Over on Facebook, Harvey Locust says, that ending was amazing. I'm actually starting to feel bad for Adar. He is being manipulated by Sauron and doesn't realize it. Galadriel is truly living up to the scene from the movies when she tells Frodo what would happen if he gave her the One Ring.
Ooh, yeah.
Theo being awestruck by her presence is exactly how I feel about her character in the show. No Half-Foots again, but I can see how they would be distracting in a battle-centric episode like this. How the tunnel was put to use was an astounding surprise for me. My only question is how Arrondir didn't realise that the hilt had been switched out with an axe. Thanks, Harvey. I had the same thing in terms of that weight when he held it in his hands. And just after Galadriel and Halbrand had taken down Adar, who was fleeing away, the longer it took for them to address the bag with the hilt or not hilt in it, I was like, oh, it's definitely not there now. This is taking way too long to get to the realization that there's been a switcheroo here, as well. But, I thought that as well, but I guess maybe they did weight it up because it is only the hilt. So, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
he didn't want to unwrap the Christmas present.
No, exactly.
You know, and I know it's probably not exactly the reason, but you know, remember Galadriel didn't know what was in it, so she would have handed it back to Arrondir, and Arrondir does have the conversation to calm Theo, thinking Theo was really regretful for giving the hilt over, so he hands it over to him to make the choice to throw it away so that he can break that connection that he has with the hilt. So potentially he didn't want to open it before giving it to Theo, because he wanted that moment with him, because effectively he's going to be a stepfather in the future is the plan, right? That's what he said to Bronwyn. He says that the three of us are going to form a family. So potentially he felt the weight of it, went, that seems about right. I'll hand it over to Theo, give him a moment to take a breath and realize he's not the bad guy here. Nothing was ruined. And then it's Theo that realizes that it's been switched out. So maybe that was the reason, that he wasn't really looking at it because he wanted Theo to be able to take back what he did almost.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
Have a heart to heart with his new stepson.
And I think you're totally right. I think having the Half-Foots in this episode would have broken the rhythm of it. And I think that's, the other side. And just, there was a great rhythm to this episode.
It was so tense though. I could see why so many people would have wanted maybe a 2-minute scene with the Harfoots just to kind of get a breather as well. Yeah. But it worked so well. It was really tense.
Yeah. And I think you're right. Galadriel, seeing warrior Galadriel, just awesome. And, the Theo being awestruck by her. I mean, we even have Isildur, in a sense, being awestruck by her as well on the boat. It's just truly like, that person who is bigger than what she is.
Absolutely.
So it was great getting warrior Galadriel here in the battle.
Yeah, even if she did call Isildur the lowliest of stable boys, I just thought was pretty harsh for someone that, again, becomes very important in the future.
Well, that's it. And I mean, she does have that moment where, you hear Isildur saying, it's not the real Númenor. He wanted to get away. And she says then it exists in the heart of even the humblest stable boy. But she also doesn't kind of disagree with Isildur that the island of Númenor, the Star Island, maybe isn't the real thing.
Yeah.
It's the Diet Coke to the full sugar Coke.
I know, and you're kind of going, if you've actually been there, like Galadriel has, or at least knows how it was created, because I think she'd been there at one point, you kind of want to confirm that if somebody's saying that's not the real Númenor, just say, no, it's not. I remember the real Númenor. I was there 1,000 years ago, or whatever. Just say it. But no, can't do that. Good stuff. Thanks so much, Harvey, for your thoughts. Andy Arhus says, glad to have the podcast back. Hope you enjoyed your holiday. I am loving this series. I had high expectations after the Peter Jackson films, and the show is exceeding them. The casting is impeccable. Episode 6 was the best one yet. However, there was one drawback. I give Arrondir an F for his shabby choice of hiding place for the evil sword, which we now know is a key. Come on, Arrondir, under the floor of the tavern? And what do you think about Sauron? Is he dead, as Adar says, or will we see him this season? Or have we seen him already? Will he become like the Mephisto tease in the Marvel films and series? You never know. You never know. I think our theory of maybe Halbrand being Sauron, but a fair-faced version of Sauron,
I think so,
could be possible.
Yeah, I think so. As I said, I just wonder whether Adar saying, I split Sauron in two is something, a bit more behind that. And even, I know Harvey had mentioned, that Adar is being manipulated by Sauron, but I just wonder whether that's the case. Even though he doesn't, if Halbrand is and doesn't recognize him, that is part of the strategy, isn't it? So that he remains unknown, and is free to wander Middle Earth. But, so I wonder if it's really a wicked web that is woven here. And also then to your point around Arrondir, on the F, I think you're totally right. I mean, this is still a 5 Mount Dooms out of 5 for me. But I just thought, okay, you've escaped the watchtower. You have gotten ahead of the enemy. Just get out of there. Flee to the Elves. Get out of the Southlands. Because that they're after the hilt. Yeah. And so, yes, I personally would have, if I was Arrondir, I would have just gotten everyone out of the Southlands.
I know, but it is their home. They're fighting for their home.
Yeah, exactly.
And trying to stop the Adar and the orcs from taking over and turning it into this bad place. Like, if they'd just gotten out of the way, then they would never see their homes again. So I can understand why he stayed with the Southlanders who wanted to protect and stay there. But yes,
I mean, maybe taking
just taking the blade off on a horse very far away and throwing it at the ocean himself would have been a good plan.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks so much, Angie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angie. Thanks so much, fellow ringers, for all the feedback. Keep it coming in on the remaining episodes of The Rings of Power. Remember, you can send in your thoughts to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. And we are on Twitter as well, at TV Pod Industries.
A big apology to everybody who does follow us on Twitter. The other night, I connected up our Patreon account and and our main website, and it effectively posted 100 posts to Twitter the other night. Every single post I've ever made on Patreon suddenly appeared on Twitter, and I couldn't stop it. But it's done now. It can't happen again. It's over, and I'm really sorry for a bit of spammage to everybody. Oh well.
No worries. But if you love the podcast, then please share the podcast, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love. You can also support us over at patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, as well as on buymeacoffee.com/TVPI. But please stay subscribed to TV Podcast Industries.
Oh yeah, 2 more episodes of Lord of the Rings of Power to come, and we're also covering She-Hulk, which has I think 3 more episodes to go. We have Sandman, which just has the 1 episode left to go. The bonus episode is all we have left to cover of the Sandman, and then, as we said, covering the Pennyworth Season 3 on HBO Max, which is coming out from next week as well. So looking forward to all that
legacy
stuff.
Item,
Yes, all the way back to our original podcasting of Gotham.
Yes. But thank you so much, fellow ringers, for joining us. As always, a pleasure talking about the Rings of Power, especially an episode so unbelievably epic. But in the meantime, fellow ringers, keep watching, keep listening, and keep sailing west.
Bye.
Bye.